time to be alone. Kids distracted, wifey on the phone. Slip out the back door with my car keys. If I don't leave now, someone will try and find me. It's different this time right now, solo. I have the perfect plan, nowhere to go. Cruising down the highway, not doing more than 70.
Welcome to the If You Cook, I'll Clean podcast. I'm your host, Eli Breeden. Joining the podcast again today is Miss KIMMII, all the way from the Queen City. Welcome, young lady. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Eli.
Good. So, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Just being real busy, being positive, keeping it light.
Okay. We got some interesting feedback from some of the viewers based on, the conversations that we had. So that's why we are having you back again today. So a couple of things that I want to discuss this time. I know before we talked about a few things. We touched on food, sex, as well as peace in the home. Today I want to just twist it up a little bit. Okay. Or change it up just a little bit. We'll stick primarily to those topics, but I have some very interesting questions for you today.
Well, I'm based sure you
do. Based on some of the chapters. So what we'll start with is chapter 9 is a good one, and that was for the kids' sake. So my first question to you is, what is your opinion regarding staying in a relationship for the kids? Should a couple try to stay together for the betterment of their children? Or, should couples maybe split up because it becomes toxic and ultimately it's bad for the entire family? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I really believe that if a couple is if they're going through a situation, you should never stay in a situation for the children. They see toxicity, then that's what they will breed. That's their environment. That's how they become. So you don't want your children to be a product of their environment because you all wanted to save face or create a look that really isn't there. That's not fair to the children either, because they're seeing what others outside of the home are not seeing. They're feeling all of the emotion attached to that. So I couldn't co-sign on that. I wouldn't subscribe to anything of that nature.
Well, we all know that there are couples out there, or individuals, or marriages, whatever the case may be, they tend to stick around sometimes longer, maybe than they should. And I don't know if I'm really phrasing this right, because you have different perspectives, right? And in the future, I'm going to have a spiritual perspective. I may have some preachers on, or some folks who are heavily involved in church. So their take may be just a little bit different from how the world sometimes views, relationships as it relates to staying in marriages for the kids. So I guess my question is, what do you believe, or what do you think about individuals who do end up, sticking it out for the sake of their kids? Because you do have certain instances and circumstances where they make it work, and because they know if they break this thing up in terms of the monotony or the family regimen, that at some point in time it's going to have a downturn or a negative effect on the entire family. So what are your thoughts on individuals who say, you know what, we are going to make this work, and we're going to do everything in our power. We're going to put our happiness to the side. We're just going to remove ourselves, and we're just going to make sure that the kids are good. We'll suffer, but we want to make sure that the kids are good. What is your take on that?
Well, the Bible did tell us we will have long suffering, but there's also a scripture that says if two can't walk together and agree to separate. Again, I just believe that if they are able to be amicable,
Okay, ain't no we
And
had some religious. I don't need to have no preachers on the show. You
I,
good? I
I
had
just
no
made a
idea.
statement. It's
Okay,
just a statement.
okay.
But and a fact, because this is
I'm gonna
all.
need you to pray for me later too, because that was good. That was excellent. But I'm listening.
But I really believe that if they are able to be amicable, if you can see and be selfless in that situation, if it's working, I'm not gonna knock you. It's a lot of work, definitely, putting yourself aside. But I think that that was something that was kind of sort of the whole purpose of the marriage or the relationship is for us to put each other. I'm gonna put this in front of me. I love you enough to say, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and you love me enough. So there is some things that come into play. If they can work it out, I admonish them wholeheartedly to do that.
One of the things that just dropped in my spirit just now, I'm being honest, is no, this isn't a joke this time. That's coming later. So, my parents never argued in front of us, right? And some would probably say, that's, not necessarily realistic or it's not good from the standpoint of you don't really truly get to see, how honest a relationship can be. But my point is, my parents intentionally never argued in front of us. I never really had a conversation with my dad about it. I think it was just something that was understood. Even though I haven't had that conversation with him, I have a strong assumption that they intentionally said, you know what, we're not going to have these conversations in front, of our kids because we don't want to, represent ourselves and make them potentially look at us in a negative light. So I think that's important because, and unfortunately, that those traits didn't fall upon me,
So I know.
unfortunately. But I do believe that it's important to have that structure in place to be able to say, you know what, we're not going to have these conversations in front of kids because we don't want these kids to start thinking that this is truly how relationships should be. That it could have a positive effect or it could potentially have a negative effect. For me and my brothers, overall it was positive because, that was the template that we followed. May not necessarily have been realistic because, depending on who you're connected to, your significant other, they may not necessarily have had that same upbringing and their mentality may be completely different. So, what are your thoughts, since we're talking about for the kids' sake? What are your thoughts about couples not or intentionally not having certain conversations in front of their kids?
If it's intentional, it makes the situation actually better. Children are going to pick up on the environment anyway. They're like us. They're small beings. However, I believe that a man and a woman deciding, or however if you're married, this is how we're going to do things. It makes for a better situation. And I don't necessarily think, I think at one point, because we had a conversation about this previously, I don't think it was a setup though. What it did was make you a better person to not be confrontational. If they can stick to that and say, we're not going to do this in front of them, it makes life better for the children. If you're doing it for them, and if that's the reason, it really does make a difference to not see conflict or things that are not. Children are not going to understand every conversation. So there's some conversations they don't need to be privy to anyway.
Absolutely.
So I agree
Absolutely.
with not arguing in front of them wholeheartedly, or even certain topics shouldn't be discussed. If you are disgruntled or not in agreement, yeah, those are conversations that need to be had outside of the children's presence.
I can agree with that entirely. That's good, and we could probably talk about this forever. So let's talk about something that I think a lot of couples experience if they are together long enough. I believe it was chapter 8. I believe it was Misery Loves Company. My question is, do you think it's in the best interest of married couples to hang out with single or divorced friends?
No,
Okay.
I don't subscribe to that. There are certain scenarios, they're very minute. I don't know where they are. I'm just being honest. But birds of a feather flock together.
There you go.
There's no way as a
Did you remember that from the book, or are you just saying that as you go? Because that's in the book.
well, I read the book.
Okay. You keep reminding me of that. I believe you.
No, but there are things that happen that take place that don't make sense. You can't tell me how, if you're divorced. Well, let's start over. So you're single, right? And I'm married, and we're trying to have conversations. As a single person, there's no advice you can give me to being married at all. Now, I can give you some pointers on being single because I was that at one point. I'm no longer that. We're married. So once you cross the threshold, there's nothing else for us to discuss. We can have, if we happen to be at the same event, or, if there's an outing, that's different. But just to say, we're deliberately going to hang out, and I know that's bad for the marriage. You're setting yourself up for failure if you do that, because the women are more different than men. Of course, we know that, but they tend to think differently in the way of, I'm not going to put myself in a position. A brother ain't going. We going to hang out at the strip club. Come on, man. You ain't got. Well, you don't want. Your wife ain't going to trip. Those kind of things that they say, they encourage and make it a okay thing. But when he gets home, it's problems. Because if he didn't discuss where he was going with his wife, and everybody has this thing of, well, you're grown, you should be able to do what you want. Yeah, to a degree. But you are no longer your own when you say I do. So there is some level of accountability. I wouldn't be going places that, if I think it's iffy, I wouldn't let my husband or my significant other be wondering, well, where's she at, what's she doing, and why are you there, and why can't we have this discussion? So yeah, I don't think the two should hang together. That's a bad combination.
So to expand on that, I don't necessarily want to not impose, but I don't necessarily want to give my personal thoughts to this situation, because I think there are some individuals, right, who can offer some good advice, regardless of their status. You have good advice, you have bad advice. It's in the book. So one story that I do remember in the book is, these couples, or not couples, but like these guys would go on guys trips, right? Mm-hmm. And when they went on guys trips with the individuals who were married, the single folks were not as I want to be careful in how I speak, but the single folks behave better on those trips than the married folks. And not every case scenario. I don't want to break no man code and guys, coming after me in the comments, but that one of the conversations was, we're more concerned about our married folks, because once they go on these trips, they're just like untamed, and they feel like they're getting out of jail. So they may do some things, not, anything that would necessarily compromise their relationships at home, but they may do some things that some of the single folks wouldn't do. And that was a conversation that was in the book. So what do you think about that? Because I do believe you have people who give good advice. You have people who give bad advice, regardless of their status.
True enough. I'll put it this way. At one point in my life, I did couples therapy. And it was difficult for the therapist to see it from a perspective, because they were not in a relationship. They'd been single for a very long time, in fact. Of course, I didn't ask those questions, because it's like, you're a therapist, you're the specialist, this is what you do. But that was not the case. So it's hard for them to empathize or feel what I'm feeling, or feel what the significant other is feeling while they're in the moment. So they can give solid advice, but then is it applicable? And that's where you run into these things. For a man to go on a man trip and go, wow, says a lot about his home life. Is he really at peace? One thing I have found, I know 3 couples, and I admire them wholeheartedly. Now, of course, I'm not in their personal, but have been around them for years. Never heard of the husband cheating, never heard of the wife cheating, but definitely see where they're happy with each other. And it's always not so much what they say, but their actions with each other. And his response is, I would not ever do anything to hurt my wife because I love her like that. But that's not just lip service. That's how he acts. And vice versa. That's how his wife is with him. So it's a lot that plays into getting advice. You also have to consider your source. You're right. You could actually sit down with somebody who's not necessarily in your position. However, what are their experiences? What is their upbringing? What's the background? What are you bringing to the table for you to be able to give me some solid advice? So you have to be very, very particular in who you choose to get advice from. What is the advice pertaining to? It's a lot that goes into that. I wouldn't just sit down with Bobby Joe and say, hey, man, you look like you get the answer. Because we found, too, that people who look like they know what they're talking about don't really know what they're talking about.
So are you saying that the only way that someone could relate to certain circumstances or situations is if they've been in that situation before themselves? So I guess, for instance, if there's and I can use any analogy, but for this conversation, if there's a preacher, right, who's single, but obviously he has to have couples therapy, because it's a part of the ministry, or marriage counseling. He has to do marriage counseling. Do you think that particular preacher is qualified to offer therapy to or advice to those couples?
Spiritually, that's a different scenario because there's a lot that comes into that. First of all, he or she should be referencing what the Bible says or what the Lord says about that particular situation. Hopefully he's also done an extensive amount of spiritual prayer before he sits down with somebody. So that's different when you're talking about a preacher. And there's also a level of training that he or she is supposed to go through when you're talking about we're going to sit down and have these types of conversations. Again, and even without training, and I'm going to make sure I kind of sort of walk the line because there are some that don't have it, but because they have so much life experience. Again, you can have a pastor who's never had a situation or a circumstance, but because he's been exposed to so much, people come and tell the pastor what they won't tell their spouse. They'll tell the pastor what they can't tell the parent. They'll tell the pastor those things. And so he's just, or she is exposed to different types of, environments, experiments. So it makes a difference when you're talking about a preacher. But outside, well, even today, it's kind of sort of, that's a slippery slope even then. But you can't completely discount the preacher if that's the question. That's the definitive answer. You cannot, because that's what they do. And hopefully, if he's really spending time in meditation, time in what he's supposed to be doing, Scripture will definitely put you in the right place, hands down.
That's great. So with that being said, one more scenario regarding this particular topic. So, for instance, if there is an individual who's divorced, right? But they were successful in their marriage for however long they were in the marriage, and they were great to their spouse. They were positive. They wanted to make it work, and for whatever reason, it didn't work. Are you then saying that someone who is married should not hang around or be affiliated or do certain things with this individual whose their title is divorce or they're divorced, but they were positive in their marriage, and they still see the good things in terms of qualities about marriage, and they still probably, and I'm just throwing out a scenario, want to be married even to this day? Are you saying that they shouldn't hang around married folks?
I'll put it this way.
You see what I'm saying?
I do. And the positive side to that is you do have people who are genuinely and sincerely good and were successful inside of their relationship with certain things. But the relationship obviously wasn't successful because, well, you now bear the burden of being divorced. So to say that all advice, not so much, but there would be some things that you can, because again, that's an experience. We cannot, I don't know what it's like to be on crack. I can't tell you what a withdrawal is, nor do I desire to find out. However, somebody that has had that experience can tell you when they wake up what it feels like, why they have to chase the next high. I would be remiss. I couldn't be that type of therapist. I couldn't sit down and say, hey, well, you were high today. How did it go for you? You know what I'm saying? We can't do that. So I don't know what it is. Certain things I wouldn't even place myself in. And I know that and everybody's different. So let me make sure I put that disclaimer out there. But I would not put myself in a position where I'm taking advice from somebody and that doesn't have enough experience. So if you were married, how long were you married? What was the marriage like? I wanted to know the background, how long were y'all together? How did you meet? What was the circumstances of you breaking up? What led up to? So if you've had enough experience, again, you talk to somebody who's been married for 3 years, they probably got a little bit of advice. But if you talk to somebody who's been married for 22 years or 30 years or 50 years, they can give you a whole lot more advice. They can give you some solid stuff, even if they're divorced, simply because they stayed in the relationship a longer amount of time.
Right. And I'm having so many questions going through my head, but we'll save them because we will have you back. So there's a chapter in the book called Third Party Influence. Do you think that it's in the best interest, right, of a marriage for a woman to confide in their girlfriends regarding marriage?
That's dangerous. That's dangerous. Well, I'll put it this way. If the girlfriend is in a healthy relationship, she's happy with who she's with, I wouldn't tell every detail because we all need to vent. That just comes with being friends. So that's a conversation we can have. But if
because it happens quite often.
Oh, absolutely. But if you have a homegirl and she's not married or she's unhappy in the relationship because she doesn't necessarily have to be married. But if she's unhappy, you have to be very careful what you say to her because she'll then in turn take what you said and then she'll be with your man. That's dangerous. So you have to be very selective in who you confide in, and you also have to be selective in the information that you share. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Now, let me ask you this, because you were in the beauty industry for a number of years. So you've experienced, or you've had clients, a number of clients, many of clients who, you guys probably shared pleasantries, different stories with each other. Mm-hmm. And obviously we're not mentioning names on the show, but do you know of, or have you heard of any situations where that woman, based on this particular scenario, that woman actually stole somebody's man based on the information she was gathering from her friend?
Absolutely. Believe it or not, when you stand behind a chair, you're a therapist. You get everybody's business, whether you want it or not. So yeah, she sat in the chair. Hey, guess what? And this was a badge of honor for her that she had got the guy. The lady and the man were having issues. So we'll call her Mildred, or Party A. She was having problems with her man. And
you used the old name, didn't you? Mildred. Where are you from? And where is Mildred from? South Carolina, somewhere?
Your hometown.
Yeah, she wasn't from. We didn't have no Mildreds. We had some Eldreds. We didn't have no Mildreds. I don't know no Mildreds. They all down. Them your cousin people.
Oh, but nonetheless, that was Mildred and her husband, and then the young lady that was sitting in my chair was saying, she was talking about all the things that he wanted and she wasn't doing, and she complained about not being able to perform.
Mildred gonna come looking for your ass too.
Mildred
I know
has no
we making up names, but that's not a good one to use. Mildred is gonna be looking for you because she about 85 years old now. Because them names, that they stopped using them names in the late 30s. So
no,
Mildred
they didn't.
gonna find you.
We're gonna do a
You
test.
know a young Mildred? We ain't doing that.
I'm gonna
test.
look that up, and I'm gonna bring that information back to
all
the
right.
audience.
I apologize. What we're
But
saying.
she was very into listening to what Mildred was saying. Well, yeah, you're not doing this as he makes me upset about this. He's fussing about that. It's all those things. But they were together, and meantime, in between time, we'll call her Tina. Tina was sitting in the chair with nobody, so she had time to dedicate to this guy and pick up the pieces, so to speak.
And Mildred actually sounds like she was still somebody, man, way back in like the 50s or the 40s. At that Pine Top Club y'all used to have in the community up the street on the dirt road.
I can't.
You used to live on, you used to live on the dirt road. But I apologize, what were you saying?
So once it came to a head, so to speak, she was like, how could you do this to me? How dare you do that? And you said, you're my friend. And she was like, well, you made the complaint, so you made it seem like you were no longer interested in what he had to say. You were no longer interested in what was going to make the relationship work. So I just did you a favor.
That's cold heart.
But that's how she said it. That's what she felt. And I of course, I don't know who Mildred was, but sitting there looking at Tina, you're single. You don't have any children. So you have time to dedicate to what Mildred couldn't do because she's being...
You're going to find out soon who Mildred is because she's going to be in your comments. She's going to be all in the comments.
And then there is also a scenario where, again, I would not tell anybody to confide. You got to be selective in who you share things with. So there was a couple. They were married. He owned a business. And his wife came to work for him. Now, the wild thing was the wife put the money up for the business. And, she would complain about the little things that the husband did, but there was a lady that came in to work with them. Of course, this chick was sitting in my chair. She came in to work with them, and she was telling me all the stuff that happened and how the wife wasn't this and that. Next thing you know, he divorced his wife, and he married her. Now, the marriage didn't work.
Are you serious?
Oh, I can't make this up.
That sounds like a story in the book.
So these are things that happen, and you go, wow. So I'm very selective in who I share things with. I'm extreme. I play it very close to the vest. Sometimes there are things that, you just kind of sort of need to work through your own self. You need to figure out so why is this a problem? What is really going on? We oftentimes deal with surface stuff, but nobody wants to, what's the root of the problem? What caused us to be in this position anyway? Why are we here? So, I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. I'm for real. Never meant to make your daughter cry.
That is cold-hearted, and you just reminded me of one of the stories that's in the book. I believe that there was a certain situation where the guy was dealing with this chick, right? I shouldn't say chick. He was dealing with this young lady, and he was married, right? So the young lady was... And this is not necessarily related to third party, but you just reminded me of a story. She was all in his head. She was giving him everything that he wanted. And obviously, after he left, his significant other, wife or whoever, that situation didn't work out either. Because it's almost like certain people, I'm not going to label or say women or men. Yes, I will. Some women are thrill seekers.
Men too.
Yeah, I agree. But some women are thrill seekers in this instance, and they're looking for the next thrill. So, but when that thrill is gone, they don't really want your ass anymore.
Well, it's not so much that it's a thrill, okay? It's the level of non-accountability. So, as long as you're somebody's husband or boyfriend,
I've seen that.
We're good, because I don't have to clean up behind you. I don't have to cook for you.
Yeah.
I don't have to do certain things as a significant other or a wife. So you're the outside chick, We have a little bit of fun, and you go home. Don't leave your shoes at the foot of the bed. Don't leave no jewelry laying around. Take your stuff with you when you go, because this is not what this is. So yeah, they'll play the game, but you have men who do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a dangerous game when you start playing like that. The thing is to realize that that's what it is. Some people go in, oh, I just knew we were gonna make it because it wasn't working with me and this person. But see, you didn't take the time to do the homework with the person
Right.
that you were with.
Absolutely.
So how in the world you gonna come bring this to my table and tell me, oh, we gonna sit
Mm-hmm.
down and feast? The devil's a lie.
And like I said in one of the last shows, you take yourself with you everywhere you go.
Everywhere you go.
So if you're a cheater in the current relationship, you're going to be a cheater in the future relationship.
Until
unless
you
of course
decide
unless
that
you
you
change something.
Right. Well, unless you decide that you no longer want to be that.
Right.
You determine who you are,
Right.
and what you want to be. So.
Right. Absolutely. So I appreciate you coming on again today. It's been a pleasure. Obviously, we're going to have you back, and I just want to just be honest with you and just let you know you're going to need to be looking out for Mildred, because Mildred is coming for your ass. That's all I got to say. Well, guys, once again, we thank you for tuning in to the If You Cook Out Clean podcast. The book is in the description below. Any music that you hear will be in the description that you like. And yeah, we'll see you guys soon for the next episode.
Clear my head, can only think of one smell. I haven't smoked since college, thinking about doing it. Yeah, no one will know, cause my windows is tinted. Maybe right downtown to see the bright lights, or take a walk in the neighborhood with the big houses on the south side. Or do what they do in the movies, watch planes fly to the sky. Don't know what to do with myself, not used to this alone.